Welcome, everybody, to the Let Purple Rain podcast. My name is Joe Arpezi, otherwise known as Purple Rain. I started my CFF work in 2008. Then, after stepping away for 8 years, I returned in 2024 as Purple Rain. You can find all of my content over at letpurplerain.com. You can also follow the show here on YouTube and Spotify. I definitely recommend that you go over on X and follow me there. I can be found at UW underscore purple underscore rain. That is spelled REIGN. It is the best place to keep up to date with everything that I'm putting out, as well as work from other amazing content creators here in the CFF space. I highly recommend that you follow me there. And doing some couple the short, quick announcement, and this is something that I've been kind of talking about here for about a month now. This is going to be fourth week in a row. To give you guys an idea of what my schedule is going to be like here now that we're in the regular season. On Mondays, I will be putting out my waiver wire targets article. Tuesdays, I release my player rankings, and those are exclusive to premium subscribers over at letpurplerain.com. Thursday, today, I put out my Stardom Situm podcast show, and then Saturday mornings, I put out my player prop spotlight. Premium subscribers get full access to all of this amazing content. If you're not a premium subscriber, you can sign up for a 7-day free trial and give it a test drive to see how much you like the content that I'm putting out for you guys here. Got a little bit of a scratchy throat here tonight, guys, so bear with me. YouTube and Spotify will be the home of my start sit suggestions of the week. And then over at Let Purple Rain in the premium subscriber section, that will be the exclusive home where I answer your submitted questions. Every week, I put out a message thread on both X and Substack where you can submit your questions for your lineup. I will go through and answer all of those for you guys. And now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's dive into some college fantasy football. Getting everything here set up and ready to start with. Once again, for anyone that's brand new to the show, I will go through in my start sit selections. I will take 3 quarterbacks, 3 running backs, 3 receivers, and 3 tight ends. I will go over my take on each of their situations for the week and tell you whether or not to start them or sit them. I also go through advanced stats along with handing out what I call my fantasy matchup grade for each of these players. I will verbally tell you whether or not something is really good for the matchup, pretty good, average, kind of bad, really bad. And for those of you watching on YouTube, I kind of do a color coding association. Dark green is really good, light green, pretty good. The black squares are average, light green, kind of bad, or excuse me, light red, kind of bad, dark red, really bad. And so I'm going to kick off things here with a pretty interesting take. I think I might be a bit higher on him this week than a lot of other people, but that is Anthony Calandria, quarterback from UNLV. He is going up against Miami of Ohio. Vegas is calling on UNLV to score 26 points in this game, and my gut feeling says that they might be a little low on that one. I would not be surprised if UNLV puts up 30 points or more here. From a fantasy matchup grade, I'm giving this a B+. I really like how the UNLV passing game is going to match up against Miami of Ohio. They're also pretty good against the run here. Bring that up because Calandria is a dual threat quarterback. Miami of Ohio, they are giving up 2.5 passing touchdowns per game. That is really good for this matchup. Their red zone touchdown conversion rate is 80%. That is really good for UNLV as well. And their third down conversion rate is 57.7%. So you've got the Vegas line. I think it should be over 30, not 26, but anything 30 and up, I really like. The fantasy matchup grade is right on the edge of being an A-. So it's a pretty good one, and then every other advanced stat I brought up is really good here. This one's straightforward. Anthony Calandria, start him. My next pick here is Drew Mestamaker from North Texas. They are taking on Army. Vegas is calling on North Texas to score 25.5 points. I agree with this one here. Last year, the North Texas offense was on fire. Then they came up against Army and just got slowed down and they had a real off day, and I'm kind of expecting that here again. It is earlier in the year. Army hasn't played a lot of quality opponents, so I do think that their advanced stats are a little skewed here. Um, but from a fantasy matchup perspective, I give this a B minus, mainly just because North Texas has been so good that it kind of bumps up that fantasy score. But the rest of the advanced stats are not very good for North Texas here. Army's only giving up one passing touchdown per game, which is kind of bad. Uh, Red zone touchdown conversion rate is 37.5%. That's really bad. And then third down conversion rate is just under 30%. That's kind of bad. Um, like I said, I do think these advanced stats for the Army defense are a bit skewed, but that's a lot of red, a lot of negative that I see here. And like I said, I remember last year, this was a real tough one. Um, if my memory serves me correct, which it doesn't always, I do believe that North Texas played at Army last year, so that is another thing that could come into play for that one. But my gut feeling tells me that whatever your expectation is for Mestamaker based on what we've seen this year, it's probably going to come in below that expectation. So I'm going to play it safe here, and I'm going to say as long as you've got other options available, take Drew Mestamaker, North Texas, sit him. My last quarterback that I'm going to review here is Cade Klubnik from Clemson. He is taking on Syracuse, and Vegas is calling on Clemson to score 36.5 points. All of us have been following Clemson and Klubnik this year. We realize like this offense has not really clicked. Um, and Klubnik has been in for a consensus number one quarterback. He's been a disappointment this year from fantasy perspective. But I wanted to put him on here because if you're still holding on to him, I do think that we've got a good matchup for him this week. The pressure that they have for losing two games, I think, is something that was the coaches tapped into this week. I know Dabo Sweeney's been under fire. I think these coaches really got underneath this team, and they're going to come out firing in this one. This is going to be what I think a redemption game for Clemson to try and shut all the naymakers down. Um, Vegas is kind of agreeing, 36.5 points being projected for them. I'm right in agreement with that. The fantasy matchup is a B minus here, and that's mainly the only reason it's not better is just because Clemson has not been better on offense. So, just the way that the numbers match up between that Syracuse pass defense, Clemson pass offense drags it down to a B minus, but that is still pretty good. And really, every stat I have here to look at are pretty good stats for Clemson this one. Syracuse gives up two passing touchdowns a game. I like that. Their red zone touchdown conversion rate is 60%. I like that. And their third down conversion rate is 42.6%. So this really tells me that Clemson's going to find a way to be able to move the ball down the field, to get into the red zone, to be able to score the majority of time, score touchdowns the majority of the time that they get down there. And we know that Syracuse will give up passing touchdowns. So I do think that this is a good bounce back game. If you need some help for your QB2, maybe you don't have a very deep roster, you're in a Power Four only league, and you got Klubnik in there. I want to tell you, this is a week that we can kind of ignore. I think that we can ignore everything that we've seen from Klubnik so far, and he should perform more to the type of expectations that we had in the preseason. So, Cade Klubnik, Clemson, start him. Take a sip of water here before I jump into the running backs. All right, I'm going to kick things off with Jaden Baugh, Florida, going up against Miami. Vegas is calling for 21.5 points from Florida. Baugh's been probably the most reliable part of this Florida offense, and I wanted to bring him up just because I don't think this is a very good matchup, folks. This is one of those where I think that you are going to need to probably put him on your bench here. One thing to remember, like Notre Dame is a very good rushing team. Miami handled that Notre Dame ground game pretty well. And that's one reason why I have the fantasy matchup here as a D, as in David, D minus, which is pretty bad. Miami is only giving up 0.3 rushing touchdowns per game. That is really bad here for Florida. The red zone touchdown conversion rate is 50%, and Miami gives up 2.5 yards per carry. Both of those are average numbers here, but my gut is just kind of like I look at these numbers. Florida And also, they just kind of are spiraling. Maybe after a coaching change is made, maybe they get a little more fire underneath them. But something tells me a lot of these players just they're not as into it. Even though Baugh is playing really well, how well is that O line going to open holes for him? How well are the receivers and the quarterback going to play to help keep the defense honest and not focusing on him? So this is an easy one for me here. Even though he's been really reliable this year, I'm going to say Jaden Baugh, Florida, sit him. Next up, I have Sire Gaines from Boise State. They are taking on Air Force, and Vegas expects Boise to score 30.5 points. I give this fantasy matchup an A minus. I really like the way that this looks for the Boise running game. Air Force is giving up 2.5 rushing touchdowns per game. That is really good. Their red zone touchdown conversion rate, 71.4%. That is also really good, and they're giving up 3.9 rushing yards per carry. That's pretty good here. Some of the concerns that people have with Sire Gaines, they're splitting up the carries too much. What we thought would be a two-headed monster at the start of the season is slowly kind of emerging into a three-headed monster. But I think even with a smaller workload, 12, maybe 14 carries, this matchup looks so good that I can still see Sire Gaines hitting 100 yards, getting a touchdown in this one. So whether you're looking for a second or third running back, a flex option, if you've got Sire Gaines from Boise State on your roster, I'm going to recommend start him. And my last guy here, probably going to say his first name wrong, Keyshawn. Keyshawn Owens from Florida International. They are taking on Delaware, and Vegas is calling on FIU to score 29.5 points. I like this fantasy matchup. I gave it an A minus grade, which is really good. Um, let's see here. Delaware is giving up 2 rushing touchdowns per game. That is pretty good for this matchup. The red zone touchdown conversion rate is average at 55.6%, but I really like how Delaware is giving up 4.5 yards per carry, which is pretty good here. Owens, he doesn't get a huge workload, but he's extremely productive with that workload. He's been putting up really good numbers all year. He's been extremely reliable as a fantasy asset. He was one of my favorite waiver wire options this week at the running back position. I don't remember exactly where I had him, guys, but I really like the way that this offense is shaping up. He's been kind of the centerpiece. He is the, I know workhorse isn't the right term with the amount of carries he gets, but like he is like the workhorse. He's the gas that makes the engine go in this offense. So I'm a really big fan on Owens. If you happen to pick him up, or if he's still sitting out there in your league and you didn't get him on the waivers, guys, and maybe you're not a premium subscriber. You weren't able to read that section where I recommended Owens, but I'm going to tell you right now, if he's still out in your league, go get him. I think he's going to be great down the stretch, guys. So, Keyshawn Owens, FIU, start him. Okay, wide receivers now. I'm going to start with an interesting name. I'm very invested in this name. Several of the leagues that I am the most committed to, my home league and the Kings Classic, which is a competition against, I think it's 14 industry analysts here. And, I have McAllister in a lot of these leagues, and Eric McAllister from TCU. He really hasn't been living up to expectations so far through, I believe, 3 games. Um, Actually, I'm going to take that back. I think they've only played 2 games. But here, TCU is taking on SMU in a enticing matchup. I like the fact Vegas is scoring on TCU to score 35 points, and I have an A grade for this fantasy matchup, which is really good. But some things of concern. Um, SMU's only given up 1.6 passing touchdowns per game. That is average, but their red zone touchdown conversion rate is 33.3%. That's really bad. Uh, Third down conversion rate, 28.6%. That's pretty bad. Um, and then you add in that we have not seen McAllister really get targeted the way that we are expecting. Dwyer has been the guy who's been that way. Um, this matchup on paper looks good, where you're going to want to put McAllister in there. I think a combination of some of these advanced stats of the SMU defense and the fact we've not seen McAllister do it yet. I think the better route to play here is to take it safe. If you got another halfway decent option, I'd rather put them in and have McAllister blow up on my bench than put McAllister in and he continues to produce like we've seen, less than 10 fantasy points. So even like in a full PPR league, I'm going to say Eric McAllister, TCU, sit him. One guy that I also have a lot of shares of, and I have him in the two leagues I mentioned, and he's on the same team as McAllister for me, is Dane Key, Nebraska. He's going up against Michigan. Vegas is only calling on Nebraska to score 21 points. Something tells me that's a little too low. I like the way the Nebraska offense is playing. The best team they've played, I believe, is Cincinnati. And Cincinnati, I'm kind of on the fence on exactly how good they are this year. But um, with Michigan here, they're good running the ball, but we've seen that their pass defense is not that great. Okay, like they give up yardage, they give up chunk plays, and I think that will benefit the Nebraska passing game. So I came out with a B fantasy matchup grade for this one, which is pretty good. I have a hard time giving it anything better, um, but I look at how some of these other teams have performed against them. I mean, um, I believe it was New Mexico State. I mean, if New Mexico State had the ability to put up the production they did in the passing game against Michigan, Nebraska can. Nebraska has much better talent and a much better scheme to take advantage of that Michigan secondary. The one thing I do think that's on Michigan's side here, they've only given up one passing touchdown per game. That's what they're averaging. That's kind of bad here for this matchup. Their red zone touchdown conversion rate is about average at 55.6%. But because that secondary, like I said, they give up plays, they give up some chunk plays, their third down conversion rate is only 43.5%. That's pretty good here. So the scoring opportunities, I think, it could be one of those lots of yards, a decent, like 8 receptions, a good amount of yards, but maybe no touchdown. I think that is a possibility here. But my gut tells me that chunk play might be possible, as long as they're not getting too close, like inside the 5, where Emmett Johnson may steal the scoring opportunities. Excuse me, I gotta take a drink. I was saying if they don't get too close to the goal line and Emmett Johnson steals those touchdown opportunities, I think it's at least 50-50 that Dane Key can score a touchdown this week. I cannot say that about Eric McAllister. So I know in a number of my leagues, I have put Dane Key in there as that guy that I feel a little more comfortable with, while leaving McAllister on the bench. So, I'm doing the practice what I preach thing here with my suggestions. So with Dane Key, Nebraska, I'm going to recommend start him, but maybe as like your flex option. Or in my home league, we start 4 wide receivers. So he's my wide receiver 4. The next one here is a big buyer beware one. Omar Cooper, Indiana, taking on Illinois in a big time matchup. Vegas is calling on Indiana to score 28 points. And I gave this fantasy matchup grade a B, which once again is kind of good. But the Illinois defense, yes, they have not really been tested yet. But so I'm going to say I think these advanced stats are skewed, but they're still troubling stats to look at because they're all bad. They're giving up zero point 0.6 passing touchdowns per game. That's kind of bad. 31.6% for third down conversion rate. That's kind of bad. And 33.3% red zone touchdown conversion rate. That's really bad. Cooper last week blew up 4 touchdowns against no real competition. Um, a game where Elijah Sherratt didn't need to be counted on as much. So, Cooper really benefited from that. But this is a game Indiana's going to have to lean on Sherratt. And they're going to have to lean on their best playmaker to help open up their running game. And I really kind of think here that that's what Indiana's going to have to do to be able to stay balanced. I think they're going to have to throw some early to open up the running game, whereas Indiana kind of likes to run to open up the throw. Um, so Cooper, I think, is going to be kind of that lost man out. I mean, I would not bet any money that he scores a touchdown this week. Um, if there's a possibility to do a player prop bet that he scores like under zero point 0.5 touchdowns, I would take it. I'd take it in a heartbeat. So Cooper's just one of these guys here. I left him completely out of my waiver wire targets article because I think it's going to be a 1 week blip performance, and you never really see that again out of him here. I do think he's their best wide receiver too, so he can be complimentary in some games. But I think he was the biggest trap play of the waiver wire this week. So I'm going to say Omar Cooper, Indiana, sit him. Going to our final position group, the tight ends. I'm going to start with Eli Raridan, Notre Dame taking on Purdue. And if you don't know, the state of Indiana, this is considered a rivalry game. The projected score by Vegas is Notre Dame scoring 40 points. I can pretty much agree with that one. But from a fantasy matchup grade, I only gave this a C plus, which is average. I was impressed with the way Purdue played against USC. One thing though that did kind of, you can say, benefited Purdue, and I've been on the side of this in my coaching career when I went from one school to another in conference. You know the ins and outs of the offense and defense from where you came from. You're able to kind of help prepare, little things, little tidbits, tendencies, things that other teams don't know that you can kind of lock into. And Purdue got USC's offensive coordinator from last year, the offensive coordinator by title, not play caller. I do want to say that. But so they do know a little bit more of these ins and outs of the offense, and I think they're probably able to match up a little better. But so far this year, even after playing USC, they're only giving up 0.3 passing touchdowns per game. That's really bad, and that's kind of alarming here for this matchup. Red zone touchdown conversion rate is only 40%. That's pretty bad. And then third down conversion rate is actually average, 35.1% against a USC team that was much more talented than them. So I am really leaning into these advanced stats because Purdue played a team that should have blown them out of the water, and they hung in there. And that defense played much better than I expected. You have a young quarterback who's still getting his feet wet at Notre Dame. They really haven't been clicking all that much in the passing game. So my gut tells me Notre Dame's going to ram it down their throat, and they're going to have success on the ground more than they are in the air. So what you're really hoping on from Reardon, you'd like to see him get. He doesn't always get scoring opportunities, so you want lots of receptions and a decent amount of yards. They just may not need to throw it to him, guys. They may just avoid that whole side of things and just stick to the ground game. So I'm worried about Raridan. So I'm giving a cautious sit-em suggestion for Eli Raridan, Notre Dame. Next up is a guy who's coming off of a bye week, and the week before that, a game that he didn't do much. But I'm going to go over Jackson Warren, Colorado State. He is going up against UTSA. Vegas is calling on Colorado State to score 27.5 points. And that is with Colorado State. They've been having some struggles at quarterback. But I'm giving this fantasy matchup grade a B plus, which is pretty darn good. I still really like Jackson Warren. I'm a believer in him. I think he will end up the team's leading pass catcher this year. And I love this matchup with UTSA. UTSA is the better team. They will jump out to a lead, and Colorado State's game script will have to lean on the pass. So I think the game script is in favor here for Warren to get lots of targets. And then when you look at this UTSA defense, they're giving up 2.6 passing touchdowns per game. That's really good. Their red zone touchdown conversion rate is 87.5%. That is also really good. The one thing that I think might come into play here for the Colorado State offense is that UTSA is only giving up third downs on 36.6% of the time. That is an average number, but you take an average stat and you combine it with some struggles at quarterback play. You could see some errant throws. Maybe a throw's a little too far away for people to get their hands on and get a clean catch. And I do think that might limit some of the drive opportunities for Colorado State here. But I really like the game script. I love these advanced stats. I'm going to tell you, if you got Warren, ignore that week 2 poor performance. Ignore the fact that they're coming off a bye and you haven't seen him do it again yet. I think this is a great opportunity to play him. So I'm going to recommend Jackson Warren, Colorado State. Start him. My last one here, and I never say his name correctly, guys. Shimon Meter, the tight end from Arizona State, who is taking on Baylor. Arizona State is being projected by Vegas to score 28 points. I have a C fantasy matchup grade for this one, which is average. Other average advanced stats. Baylor's only giving up 1.3 passing touchdowns per game. Really, the Baylor defense is poor against the run. And Arizona State has a team that's built that can take advantage of that run aspect. So I do worry a little bit about if you're a pass catcher and you're not Jordan Tyson on Arizona State this week. So, like I said, we have an average fantasy matchup grade. We have an average passing touchdowns allowed per game, and we have an average 36.8% for third down conversion rate. The one thing here going for Mateer is the red zone touchdown conversion rate of Baylor is 62.5%. That is all touchdowns, though. That is, it's not just passing. And like I said, Baylor's been bad on the ground. So I'm willing to guarantee you a lot of those touchdowns are coming in the running game, not in the passing game. So even though that is a pretty good stat here, I'm not putting a lot of weight in that one. And Matera had a pretty decent game last week. I'm going to tell you, ignore what you saw from last week's performance. Shimon, Mateer, Arizona State, sit 'em. All right, guys. So that here kind of wraps up the main show. And those were my selections for this week's Start Em, Sit 'em podcast episode. As I mentioned before, each week I post a thread on X and on Substack asking for your questions so I can help your lineups. My goal is to try and give everybody that watches and reads my content the best opportunity to try and win a championship this year. If you want help with your lineup, please join in those discussions on Substack and X. Submit your questions to me. Even if you submitted questions the week before, keep submitting them. If I've got the room to fit them in the show, I'm going to fit them in the show. So if you want to hear the answers to those, jump over to letpurplerain.com. Scroll down further in the article. I have the second video posted. You're going to be able to find them there. I have a link in the description below here for where you can find that article. And you've been listening to Start 'em, Sit 'em. Please follow on YouTube and Spotify. And thanks for joining the Let Purple Rain podcast. Your CFF Reign starts here.